Hey everyone, welcome to the Cohen Research channel. I've had a couple of conversations about the Treatise of Reintegration, and there's been this, I don't know, kind of understanding that it's a theological presentation, and I've been studying this stuff for a couple decades. So in understanding it, I also am trying to convey it to those who would want to understand it as well. Um, so I thought a really good way to present it was to present it from the actual document itself. Now, I love, as I've said before, the AMWORK version of the document. The AMWORK version has these sections that are indicated throughout the document, which are really easy to reference without referencing some kind of page number in a specific place. Plus, they have a little bit of meaning to them embedded in the actual organization of the document. So, uh, I've been asked by multiple people to give a presentation on the Cohen. You've heard from my friends many things based on this order. I'm not going to repeat that. Go and check them out. But one thing that should be clarified is the nature of the Treatise of Reintegration. So it was a document that was written by Saint Martin, primarily, from the oral teachings of Martinez de Pasquale, de la Torre, because he has tons of names. But Martinez, for short, Don Martinez, he uh, shared this with Saint Martin, and the way he did it, it was it was just straight out lesson by lesson, and there was, I don't know if it was a received tradition, um, but in comparative study, I can tell you that it's a pretty unique system, in that it doesn't go into much of the Brahmanism. It doesn't go much into Vedic traditions. You can find some of these things there because there's markers, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But they are just not available in the sense that you would be looking for them in, something like another system. So, for instance, when I first started studying the Cohen, I was told that it was simply restated Valentinianism. And so, like a good student, I went along and I learned what Valentinianism is. Uh, and I went to the scholars and esoteric holders of the traditions of Valentinianism, and I studied it and found that that's not true. That is an interpretation of the treatise, and that's not necessarily where it came from. It's not underground Valentinian only. It's something else too. Martinez himself says in the document that he got it from a tradition, from a Sethian tradition. So it's not just Valentinianism, it's a Sethite tradition. But it's not just Sethian either. It has modes in the universal table of Neoplatonism. But it's not just Neoplatonism. Um, on and on and on. There's so much packed into this document that were I to explain most of it, it would just literally blow your mind. And that's not to be arrogant. If you're part of a group that teaches this stuff, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Um, and if you're not, I would assume that you'd want to, because if you're watching these kind of videos, it shows interest. And so you're a serious seeker. You're serious about understanding at least. And so I would encourage you to go to your local hub of where these teachings reside. So, that being said, what exactly are we going to talk about with the Treatise of Reintegration that no one else is going to tell you? And, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I found the section that I want to tell you primarily composes the Treatise of Reintegration. And, it's hard to talk about because the people who talk about it don't know what they're talking about. And I was too in this camp, so I know how humbling it is to have to say, you know what, I don't understand this. I need to be taught this. I have no clue what I'm looking at, and I'm not in the tradition of those who have received understanding of this information. I haven't gone through the rituals. At that time, I haven't gone through any of the teachings. I haven't been given any source docs, and therefore I am profane to the system itself. And it's locked in a way to where if you don't know how to approach it, you will not get in to the inner sanctum of the teachings themselves and understand what's being talked about. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and go into the Amorc version from the traditional Martinist order of the Treatise of Reintegration of Beings. Now, if you find this part, that's great. I'm not advocating any book. I'm advocating an overall understanding of the document itself. It has nothing to do with any translator, anything to do with any rendering of language, but I think you'll like this part. So in the document itself, let's see here. I tried to pull up the document. Let's see. That's weird. There it is. So in the document, it says, furthermore, these 4 first principles of spiritual beings had in them, as we said, of the divine domination, that's the 10, a superior, major, inferior, and minor power, by which they knew all that could exist or be hidden within spiritual beings, and which had not yet emerged from the bosom of divinity. How could they have had knowledge of things, we might ask, which had not yet existed distinctly outside the bosom of the Creator? So this kind of language, I won't editorialize right now, because these first superiors, good word, emanated from the first circle, mysteriously called the denary circle, which means 10, were able to read clearly and with certainty what was happening in divinity, as well as everything contained in it. Here it comes. Let there be no doubt about what I am saying here, being truly convinced that it is for the Spirit to read, see, and understand the Spirit. Here's what I wanted to point out. These first chiefs had a perfect knowledge of every divine action, since they had been emanated from the bosom of the Creator to see all his divine operations and the manifestation of his glory. So the language is like this, but you'll see now, after we've read this paragraph, if you go to the one before it, you'll start to get understanding. So the document kind of has to be read backwards, and that's the secret to understanding this document. You go somewhere where you think you're at, and if you don't understand it, you start reading backwards to where you can understand it. So that is kind of weird language, so we're going to go to this part. The first spirits emanated from the bosom of divinity were distinguishable by their virtues, their powers, and their names. So the original title of this book is the Treatise of Reintegration of beings into their original virtues, powers, and abilities, I believe so. They occupied the immense divine circumference, commonly called domination, which bears its denary number. And they're saying, see the diagram, which is the universal table. That is where every spirit superior, and then they give an abbreviation of what kind of spirits these are. 10, major 8, inferior 7, and minor 3 had to act and operate for the greatest glory of the Creator. Their name or their number, for those looking into this stuff, proves that their emanation really comes from the quadruple divine essence. Here's the part where I wanted everybody to understand. And so it's going to get real fun real fast. The names of these 4 classes of spirits were greater than those we commonly give to the cherubim, seraphim, archangels, and angels, which were emanated later. So, that is some powerful stuff. And it gets me all excited because that kind of language clarifies what we're looking at here. This treatise is on beings that were written before the beings you hear about in other spiritual traditions. So, I'm smiling because it's so cool to say this. In the Judeo-Christian Bible, the Bible, it's written that there's a section of chapters that are written by particular units. You have the Deuteronomists, you have the Elohists, you have the Yahwists, and so on and so forth. But these kind of teachings are before any of that. They're before even the archangelic traditions of Enoch, any of the Kabbalistic schools of the chariot or the creation. These are prior to what we're used to hearing about. So, why did I bring all that up? Because Martinez talks about these beings, these emanated beings prior to the archangels, choirs of angels, seraphim, malachim, all of them, and they hold the secret to the doctrine of the Treatise of Reintegration of Beings. And how do you find out what they are teaching? You have to know or be initiated into what this stuff is talking about. You're getting a little bit of it right now, learning that this has nothing to do with the Luciferian traditions, in the sense that we're talking about the morning star and his rebellion against God, and on and on and on. That was a later rendition of this type of teaching. This is what has been called since antiquity the secret doctrine. And this type of doctrine has been taught generation after generation, and there have been some torch holders that have taught about it, have shared it with another generation, and they have carried it forth too. You have these in the Rosicrucians, the Royal Secret groups of the 1700s. You have the Eleucoans. You have the Golden Rosenkreuz. You have lots and lots and lots of groups. I mean, there's so many that, it would be a disservice to try to name a few of them. There's groups that are so hidden that we don't even know their name. And they have nothing to do with taking over the world. They have to do with this progressive way of progressive, not politically, but progressive in the sense of outside of the normal confines of ideology and doctrine. So this stuff is not easy to get into, to stumble into, to hear about. Once you've opened the Treatise of Reintegration, you are starting to become elect. just to let you know. You're never going to be able to reconcile the doctrines and the teachings of the treatise with other things. You are now set apart, and you either put that book down or you start to understand what it's talking about. And it talks about a bunch of stuff, mainly the degrees of the Knights of the Yellow Cohen. And so once you get this, you understand that as you go through the degree system, more of that book will become available to you to understand. If you don't understand it, it means you haven't been initiated, and you're not supposed to understand it. It's not written in English, first of all. It was written in French, but also in French, it was in like a broken French, because the linguist, or I mean, I shouldn't say linguist, but the original author was not that good at French. Martinez was not a good French speaking guy, but he knew enough to try to transmit what he was transmitted. So these are some of the teachings that go into that book. When you start reading sections like that, you realize that Cohen might not be the old priesthood of the Jewish Second Temple. It might be the Chohan, the Daini Chohan, the bigger priesthood. There's more and more and more that can be revealed if you're just open to trying to investigate into it rather than thinking you know. That's why Saint Martin says he who thinks he knows has so far to go, and he who doesn't think he knows has just but one more step, because you have to open yourself up to what this doctrine is about. The Treatise of Reintegration of Beings isn't about some kind of primary system that's being transmitted to you via the normal channels. If you've come into the realm of this teaching, you've come into the realm of some pretty awesome esotericism. But you don't understand it, so you have to be initiated into it. And to initiate into the Yellow Cohen is to have a mind expansion, not into the greatest cosmic mysteries. I mean, that is there, but mainly into what Saint Martin talked about as man, God, and the universe. You're going to start seeing these relationships between those primary areas open up. And I use those terms for a lack of more specific term. So, start with the first degree, go find your group, have them teach you what the first degree is, and then go read the Treatise of Reintegration. If you're like the group that originally went through this stuff, they had the first, second, and third degrees all presented to them in one night. They didn't have a Treatise of Reintegration of Beings. It wasn't written down. Martinez never just gave a big old talk on the Treatise of Reintegration. You were slowly dripped out this kind of information. So the thing I read to you may not be revealed until the 9th degree, the 10th degree, the 11th degree. You may have never heard it. It may have been something that Martinez chose not to tell anybody, but he told Saint Martin, and Saint Martin wrote it down. So that's what you have to understand, is that when you read this book, you have to place each paragraph, each section within the teachings of the degree that it's talking about. Otherwise, it's going to go right over your head, and if you're like me, you're not going to admit ignorance and defeat and be like, I don't know what I'm reading here, I need help. You're going to make up something. You're going to say, oh, this word sounds familiar to me. I know what this is. And that's exactly where the initiatic information is hiding. Right where pride will not look is where you know. Oh, I know this. Oh, you do you? Okay, know it all. Teach us what you know. And you'll find out that those who claim that they know lots about this system don't know. They just don't know, because it was not an open Steiner-like Rosicrucian society. You had to be chosen. You had to be elected. You had to be specifically selected out of a group of people who were already interested in this kind of stuff. Specifically in the 1700s, out of the Masonic Order of the Strict Observance. So you weren't just some, guy off of the street with, like me, like with a camera, ready to just talk about this stuff. You couldn't penetrate. First, you would never hear about it. If you did hear about it, you didn't know what you were talking about. You didn't have the medium to be able to communicate it, and you sure as heck weren't going to be communicating these things because it was against your Masonic obligations to even talk about. So this was very much a group of people who were not on the internet, who were not on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever we're on. YouTube, you'll see me on YouTube, subscribe. But you won't hear public announcements about the true teachings of Martinez. You won't. You're not going to hear the reality until you hear it. And then once you hear it, you'll know the difference that makes the difference in the Treatise of Reintegration of Beings. And I say this because we have so many copies, so many versions, but I really wanted to do a good, diligent effort in trying to set people correct with the understanding of the book as it's written, not as interpreted. So I hope we have more times to talk about this treatise and tradition, and have a great time.